Welcome to the Kolbe episode 270. Thank you for joining us. Today we're joined by a guest that really needs no introduction, Dr. Peter Kreeft. From Socratic Logic and the Changes in the World to Purgatory and the Angels, we enjoy drawing from the wisdom of Dr. Kreeft. Be sure to check the show notes for references to some of his books that we discuss in this episode. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Morning, Stephen. How are you?
Doing very well. We're recording today on the solemnity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, so it's a great day.
It's a great day. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have Dr. Peter Kreeft, professor of philosophy at Boston College. He's also the author of more than 100 books, a few of which we'll be discussing today. He describes himself as a philosopher and an admirer of Socrates, so he's going to find a sympathetic crowd among our listeners here. Dr. Kreeft, welcome to the Kolbe.
Thank you for having me.
We're very happy to get to visit with you. Thanks for spending this time with us. As with just about every intro I give, I know I leave a lot left unsaid about our guests, and there's nothing different today. So, Dr. Kreeft,
I certainly hope you do. Would you really like to know? Would you really like to have broadcast on the 6 o'clock news tonight every thought you've had today, subconscious as well as conscious?
You're right, exactly. I was listening to a recording that a podcast you did with Dr. Greg Bottaro, and he was reminiscing about his time in your class at Boston College. So how about you give us your first day of school spiel as though we were students in a course of yours there. And I say that, and then I wonder, would we get an introductory spiel from you at all if we were in your class for the first time?
So you want me to get into the mind of one of my students in my first class?
As though we were sitting there, what would you tell us if we showed up for class? How would you introduce yourself to us?
Oh, the other way around. Okay.
Yes.
This is my own mind, not the student's mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'd welcome you, and I'd explain that philosophy is sometimes intimidating, but it isn't really, because it's just common sense clarified. At least that's my philosophy. And I'd say that everyone is a philosopher, because to say I don't have a philosophy is a philosophy, but it's a bad one. So you have to ask philosophical questions.
Okay.
You don't have to ask technical scholarly questions, but you have to ask questions like, does life have a meaning? And if so, what is it? And how can I do it?
Okay. Would you give your students any kind of biographical information about yourself?
No. I prefer to remain mysterious. I think next to writing diaries, Facebook is probably the greatest waste of time in the history of the world. Putting a lot of makeup on your public masks is not only a waste of time, but a misdirection of effort. Truth and love are the only 2 things we have to worry about, not what other people see in us.
Okay. I have a great appreciation for this commitment to common sense and the clarity and understanding of it and the pursuit of truth. I greatly appreciate it. And fortunately, you've written a lot, so we have come to know you in various aspects of you, of course, not entirely through your extensive writing. I would like us to start by talking about your textbook, Socratic Logic, which Kolbe uses in the 10th grade English course. So students may take that not necessarily in 10th grade, but it's a high school course where they use your Socratic Logic text. Could you give us the basic tenets of that book, Socratic Logic, and maybe some of the distinctions between Socratic logic and other approaches to logic that we might encounter?
Until about 100 years ago, there was only one kind of logic. It was Socratic, Platonic, Aristotelian logic, which is based on common sense and ordinary language. Then, in the early 20th century, a new kind of logic was invented based on mathematics, often called mathematical logic or symbolic logic or propositional logic. It totally conquered the old logic. I think mine is the only full-length philosophical textbook of traditional Aristotelian logic in print, as over against well over 500 other logic textbooks, which are all based on mathematical logic. We are turning ourselves into computers. We're developing that hemisphere of the brain to the loss of the other hemisphere. We need both.
My first encounter with Socratic Logic was at Thomas Aquinas College, where we are going through the Organon, the Aristotle's books of logic. And I think they were wasted on me as a freshman, largely. It was hard for me to see what was going on. So
That does not follow logically. Most students, when they take Latin, they say it's wasted on me. I'm not going to be a medieval scholar or anything like that. But the discipline is crucial.
yeah,
Once you learn a difficult language, easy languages are easy, and once you learn philosophical logic, the less philosophical logics make more sense.
it definitely made more sense returning to it. I mean, the first time through, I guess, was a good introduction, but the coming back through and just seeing what Aristotle was doing and seeing the comprehensive nature that like Aristotle and both St. Thomas seemed to take with everything, considering every possible option and laying that things out clearly seems. So I'm grateful that we have your text to kind of guide us through a little bit more. Sometimes Aristotle seems a little brief.
The fruits of the use of that logic is very clear when you read Aquinas' Summa. Magnificently clear, simple, short, commonsensical, and comprehensible once you understand the meaning of some key abstract terms.
What guidance would you have for Kolbe students and homeschooling parents who are undertaking the material for the first time?
Well, if they're using the whole textbook, there are chapters that are much more difficult, and there are chapters that are less practically applicable and more theoretical. So don't worry if you don't understand everything. In fact, if you do understand everything in that book upon first reading, you should worry because you've probably got an IQ of about 200.
Okay.
And high intelligence, although it's a blessing, is also a great a danger. It's like scads of money. It's not evil in itself, but it's so easily misusable.
Okay. Well, that is both encouraging, and sometimes on this podcast we have conversations about the classical curriculum that Kolbe students undertake here and the introduction that they have to the great works of ancient literature and how we're not going to get it all in the first pass. So it's great. It's helpful to hear that in regard to this text as well, and the fruits that are still to come from taking it on in the first place, and what is to be gained in other realms, not just the transfer of that specific knowledge. So that's helpful.
I think that's true about any book. If you understand everything in it the first time, it's shallow enough to not deserve even the first reading. If after 3 or 4 readings you still don't understand it, give it up. You're not up to it. But it should be a book that is challenging but partly intelligible the first reading, and becomes more intelligible the second reading. And most great texts of philosophy are like that.
Kind of like well, I certainly appreciate the idea of kind of going back and continuing to learn, and it's a constant process as I reflect on this, especially as I'm getting a bit older. It seems to me that if I weren't to keep reading and delving into things, I'd be losing things faster than I'd be gaining them, and I may already be in that case. So it's a good reminder just to keep.
Well, in one sense, we get into that unfortunate case very early because the simplicity and the humility of a 1-year-old puts us to shame. I'm fascinated with the look I see on the face of little babies cradled in their mother's arms, looking up into their mother's face. What is in that look? Faith, hope, charity, trust, all 4 of them as one, not as 4 things, but as a single thing. So in one sense, we have to get back to that.
Yeah. It, of course, makes sense why our Lord references that childlike love, or that child, in order to be like children. Yeah.
But we can't remain as children. We have to become children. We can't remain in the Garden of Eden, but we have to recapture it the hard way around the world. We're kicked out of the East Gate, so we have to go 25,000 miles around the circumference of the globe in order to get into the West Gate. And the East Gate is the fall, and the West Gate is the redemption. It happened on the cross.
Some of those statements about becoming like a child. I'm wondering, Dr. Kreeft, if you found it challenging to see the success in your life that you have. You've had so many books, and like you mentioned your name, and everybody has listened to you or read one of something that you've produced. Has that been a challenge for you at any point during your life?
Yes, yes, it tends to spoil you. We need two things. We need joy and some kind of success and some kind of faith that we're doing something important and worthwhile successfully. And we also need the humility of being humbled, which is why God humiliates us. There's no way to heaven except through the cross, and that's suffering. So we need sufferings and joys. So that's why we have the morning offering. We offer him all our joys and all our sufferings.
Good. Yeah, it makes sense. Well, the sufferings to me have been very important because I think I don't grow I get to at ease when things are going well. So I
It's
need it.
almost as it's almost as if I pity God because he has to choose between giving us more sufferings and making us sorrowful but wiser, or giving us less sufferings and making us happier but more foolish. How he balances that out is something we cannot comprehend. So we're constantly surprised either by how many blessings we have, we deserve so few of them, or by how many surprising sufferings we think we can't take, but we can.
That brings in Romans 8:28, which you reference in your book several times about all things working together for the good of those who love God. Does that kind of tie in? Am I drawing a
That ties in,
logical
believe it or not,
a
believe
logical
it or not,
conclusion there?
that ties into Socratic logic.
Okay.
Because that conclusion that God works all things together for good, all things, no matter how bad, for those who love him and trust him, those who are in his bloodstream, so to speak. That's the most difficult to believe. That's the most astonishing sentence in Scripture. But the three premises on which it is based are the three most obvious and undeniable sentences for anyone but an atheist. If there's any God at all, he's got to know everything. He's got to will only the good, and he's got to have unlimited power. He can't be stopped by any force greater than himself. Put those three things together, God will for you, and he knows exactly what it is, and he has the power to do it, and you get Romans 8:28. That's an amazing power of the syllogism to move from obvious premises to a far less than obvious conclusion.
I always reflect on that because, as you said, it's very logical. If we believe God is all powerful, all knowing, all loving, all good, that statement has to be true. Yet somehow, on a day-to-day basis, at least I find myself, anxious or stressed, and then thinking, oh, God's got it all, except maybe I'm so powerful I'm going to mess up what what God's doing too by not following him. So there's this illogical.
I think there's two temptations here. One is to be so sure of your logic, and there's nothing wrong with that, that you think life is going to be easy. And the other is to realize that life is so hard that you think there's something wrong with your logic. So God's got to be a little stupid here, or a little weak here, or a little woolly minded here, or maybe he doesn't love me. But you've got to hold both of those two things, even though they seem blatantly self-contradictory. God's totally in control. He's writing a masterpiece. Well, this doesn't look like a masterpiece. Everything from hemorrhoids to the Holocaust happens that apparently spoil the masterpiece. And the worst thing that ever happened was the deliberate torture and murder of God himself. And that was also the best thing that ever happened. The power of that. So mystery is God's answer. That was his answer to Job. He didn't explain anything to Job. He just said two things. One, I'm God, and two, you're not.
In your time working with students and teaching, are you finding, as you mentioned, how our minds are moving collectively, not individually, I mean, to varying degrees, to a more sort of mathematical, sort of binary, black and white, this or that, in that direction? How is that working with your students who are trying to hold two things at once, and when they are kind of steeped in this sort of binary, this or that, and it's very difficult to kind of bridge the gap and to hold for it to be two things at once? Is that an increasing issue, you think?
I don't think it's difficult to bridge the gap because these are not two parts of a paradox which apparently contradict each other. A predicate explains the subject does not contradict 2 plus 2 equals 4. The verbal and the mathematical halves of our brain are meant to cooperate and fit together. So if you make an effort to do justice to both of them, the effort will automatically be repaid somehow. So I think if students realize that they have to develop both their reading skills and their math skills, they realize that and they do it. It's the mere effort. Well, I wouldn't say it's automatically successful, but it's like the effort to speak or to sing. It's inherent. Unlike the effort to understand deconstructionist philosophy, which is almost impossible.
So, one of your most recent books is From Calvinist to Catholic, published by Ignatius Press. What's the inspiration for the writing of this book and its timing? Why now?
Mark Rumley, head of Ignatius Press, pestered me for years to write a book. And I said, I don't like autobiographies. I distrust them. I think they're a waste of time. I don't particularly want the rest of the world to know everything about me. And then he reminded me that C.S. Lewis wrote an autobiography in which Lewis complained on the very first page that he didn't like them either. But it's really an autobiography of his conversion rather than him. You'll learn a lot about him too. But God is really the center of that story. So this is basically my conversion story with a lot of personal stuff added that's relevant to it. So it's not just an autobiography, and it's not just a piece of apologetics. It's the two combined.
I'm grateful to have gotten the chance to read it. How do you hope people will respond to your conversion story? I find myself when I hear conversion stories, I think they're wonderful. I'm delighted and excited and so happy and whatever, all those things. And I want to express that in a manner that honors that. And I also find myself wondering if how am I overdoing it when I say that? I want it to come across it's authentic. I mean it, and I don't want to overdo it. How do you hope people will respond to your conversion story?
In a sense, that's the wrong question. It confuses the
Okay.
book with the machine. When you push a button on a computer keyboard, you expect a certain response. You don't always get it. Sometimes the machine doesn't act like a machine, but like a demon, but it is just a machine. A book's not like that. So there's no one reaction that the author of a book expects from every reader. A book is not buttons to push. A book is simply something to contemplate, something to look at. It's like a work of art. What is expected of the Mona Lisa? You look at the Mona Lisa and you say, that's great. And there are expectations if you don't get some sense of mystery, some sense of femininity, some sense of ancientness, some sense of a combination of toughness and tenderness there, you're missing something. But those are not correct answers on a true false test. Those are just aspects of the thing. Almost every book, except a book of mathematics, has many mysteries in it, and you expect people to respond differently. What you expect as a common factor, I think, is honesty and open-mindedness and the willingness to learn something new. If a book doesn't shock you somehow, it's not worth reading because the before and the after aren't different. You haven't learned anything from that book. So look for surprising things in a book. And the more surprising things in a book you find, the more worthwhile it is for you.
Certainly, this book in particular was relevant. I'm a convert as well, but I converted when I was in my last year of high school, so I wasn't along the same intellectual. Well, it's one of the things that struck me about your book is that you're talking about how a lot of that was not like talking conversations with other people, but delving into texts, really into thoughts and going through. It seemed like it was a journey you were being accompanied, you were accompanied by the saints in their writings and the and knowledge and wisdom more so than like an influential person who brought you along.
Yeah, yeah. You read Aquinas, you read Augustine, you read St. John of the Cross, you listen to Palestrina's music, you visit a Gothic cathedral. These are astonishing achievements. And the first reaction to it has to be intuitive rather than rational. This is great. This is big. Maybe it's true, maybe it's false, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad, but it's something like a mountain. You can't ignore it. And that leads to a more intellectual investigation. Is it true? What are the arguments for it? What are the reasons for it? But you don't start with reason. I think you start with intuition, especially of beauty, something that touches your heart. You meet a saint, someone like Mother Teresa, an atheist meets Mother Teresa. He's impressed. Why? Well, not that she's beautiful in the ordinary sense. She's very ugly. Uh, her face has so many wrinkles. The wrinkles themselves have wrinkles, and yet, behind all that suffering that you see in the wrinkles, you see the joy in the expression in her eyes.
One of the other things I was reflecting on as I was reading your book, From Calvinist to Catholic, was the time span, because my my grandmother had been born in the early 30s, and I remember talking to her about like what's the greatest invention in your time, and she, with almost no hesitation, said the washing machine. But
That's what my mother said. You know what
I
my
had
answer to the question would be?
what is it?
Anesthetics.
Oh, yeah.
Think of living in a world without them, where the average person experienced in 1 month all the pain that you experience in a lifetime.
Hmm.
See, I would expect something like that more than the washing machine, but then when I put myself into my grandmother's shoes, I
Well,
realized
my
what she,
se my second candidate would be the boogie board, which enables anybody to be a surfer.
Yeah.
well, during that time, there's been a lot of other changes too. I mean, this is going from before Vatican II to after Vatican II, dramatic changes in the church, other dramatic changes in technology with the internet and now AI and all of those things. So, are there positive things overall over your lifetime that, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of bad things as well, but are there some really positive things that you've seen during those years?
Have seen in the culture, you mean?
Culture, church, well,
Well,
anesthetics. Yeah.
the church is a challenge to the culture and a teacher to the culture, and uh, not a student of the culture. So the most impressive thing about the church is its consistency over 2,000 years in teaching the same thing in different ways and different forms of it. There's no other institution like it. Here, let's be very frank. The church is filled with and run by jackasses. The same kind of beast Jesus chose to go into Jerusalem. That's us, all of us. Some of the popes around the time of the Renaissance were very wicked people. Some of them perhaps weren't even believers. They could have been hypocrites. We've not had a bad pope for a long time. But a church run by that kind of person who maintains its ideals even when it doesn't practice them, which maintains the truth, the teachings, the dogmas, faithfully in very different cultural situations. That's miraculous. There's no other human institution like it.
It seems to me that well, having come into the church in the late 90s, so I've not, no, mid 90s, I guess, was when I came in. But it seems like the church is rising up to the challenge, well, as it always does, you
Mhm.
know, in times of
Yep. Yep.
great new, yeah. So yeah, I guess that's my experience that things are, it's responding well right now to the many challenges that we're facing since well,
In very different ways. G.K. Chesterton, one of the greatest Catholic apologists in history, wrote two books about saints, one about St. Francis of Assisi and one about St. Thomas Aquinas. And he said, however different they are, they're doing the same thing with the culture. And I think of our recent popes. Both John Paul II and Benedict XIV were like St. Thomas Aquinas. And Pope Francis, in many ways, was like Francis of Assisi. And we need both. And now apparently we have a combination of the two in Leo.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about in relation to this book, From Calvinist to Catholic, regards the care of converts for the long term. So I kind of come at this, I'm a parish music director, so thinking about Easter Vigil that I play, lots of them, and I see the converts coming in to the church at the time of the Easter Vigil, and I think about them going forward, what a mountaintop moment that is, such a joyous occasion, and then at this point in my life, I know folks who are living their conversion, and they're closer, they're living that out. Others have fallen off the path of that, who have turned away for some reason. Do you have any advice for those supporting someone undergoing a conversion? And I'm sure it's nuanced according to the individual, but are there any overarching thoughts that you would have for those of us who are trying to support someone in that?
Yeah, I wish I was a psychologist so I could give you those kind of answers. I'm only a philosopher, so I can give you those kind of answers.
Okay.
And I'd start with the question of honesty. Well, don't you think honesty is a prerequisite for all the other virtues? And almost everybody would say yes. All right, what is honesty? Honesty is a search for truth simply because it's true, not for any personal advantage, not because it makes you feel good, not in order to please other people, but because it's true. Is there any other honest reason for converting than the faith to which you convert is true? And the only honest answer to that question is no. Well, then, when you feel all sorts of temptations to abandon the faith or forget the faith, ask that question. But is it true? It may be inconvenient, it may be mysterious, but is it true? Are you going to accept something false rather than something true for any other reason? And that other reason has to be dishonesty. Now, I guess that's psychological as well as philosophical, but without honesty, without the truth, you can't do anything. The most skilled surgeon in the world can't perform the simplest operation in a hospital where all the lights go out. So I suspect that the answer to the often troublesome question, what is the sin against the Holy Spirit? What is the unforgivable sin? I suspect the answer to that is total dishonesty, basic dishonesty. Yes, God exists, but I don't want him to exist. Yes, that's the nature of things, but I don't want the nature of things. I want to live in my own self-generated, subjective fantasies rather than an objective reality. And since God respects our free will, he says, okay, that's hell. Goodbye.
That's, I mean, it's bringing back kind of the idea of that initiation, the beautiful cathedral, the beautiful music, the truth that you're saying. It seems like once you get on that, once you start asking the question, once there's that wonder, looking at Mother Teresa's face and
Yes.
seeing this love of God through that, it seems to me once you start down that path, I mean, obviously that's what the devil wants to stop is that
Yep.
momentum. And then pride is the thing that the next thing, of course, that's going to derail that if either you lose the wonder or but once at least in my experience, once I started asking the questions, it's
Yes.
just everything snowballed after that.
Which is why an honest atheist is closer to heaven than a dishonest theist. He's still open-minded and light's going to come in.
So I've noticed in the discussion that we've just been having of the idea of thoughts versus feelings, and maybe I made that up. I don't know. I just kind of, that tends to be high on
Mhm.
my radar screen. So the
Yep.
thoughts versus feelings idea is something I noted, I picked up on in your book, The Mystery of Joy, which is another one of your new ones, also published by Ignatius Press. So here again, let's start with why is now the right time for this book in particular?
I don't know. I don't ask that question. I don't
Okay.
write books in order to conform to the spirit of the times.
Okay.
I write books because I see something true and worth saying, so I say it. And this point that thoughts are more important than feelings, uh, not that shallow opinions are more important than profoundly deep feelings, but thoughts as such are like the bottom of the sea. It's where you put the anchor to keep the boat safe. And feelings are like the waves of the sea. They're wonderful to surf on, but you can't build on them. And when I started to read Catholic literature at Calvin College, wondering whether this was true and good and beautiful or the opposite, I was struck by the fact that all the saints, without exception, say that feelings are not as important as we think, and that the devil can manipulate your feelings, but he cannot get into your intellect or will. And when you die, and you have a body no more, and you're in heaven or in purgatory, uh, your intellect and will still be there, but only those feelings which are active and in that sense intellectual and volitional are going to be there. The feelings of pain and physical pleasure, for instance, require a physical body, and you're not going to have a physical body in purgatory. Watchman Nee, a Chinese Christian mystic, has this image, which I love. Three men are walking on a wall. The first one is fact, the second is faith, the third is feeling. And as long as each keeps his eyes frontward, they walk along this high wall safely. But at one point in their walk, the second man, namely faith, takes his eyes off of fact in front of him and turns around worried about how feeling is doing. And he falls off the wall. And so does feeling, but fact never does. The object of our faith is truth. It's not our own feelings.
That seems particularly good in this conversation about joy because, yeah, sometimes I think there can be the misconception that just because you are a faithful Catholic and you like all these things we talked about before, you understand the providence, the love of God, all of those things are there. So you think, well, I should just feel joyful. I should feel happy. I should feel good all the time. And we just know that's from our own experience, but certainly the writings of the saints, that that's not the case, that
Because those two words, should feel, don't go together. You should do. You have a moral duty to do only that which is in your power. It is not in your power to create or destroy feelings. Feelings come to you passively, but your choices come from you actively. You are responsible for your choices. You're not responsible for your feelings. That clears up a lot of misunderstanding about, let's say, sexuality. Uh, Feelings, whether heterosexual or homosexual, might be disordered. But if you do not consent to those feelings and you do not act on those feelings, that's not a sin. And most people so live in feelings that they think that, oh, to have these feelings, that means you're wicked. No. Uh, God lets the devil tempt you with all sorts of feelings about all sorts of things. And to be tempted is not to be wicked. Jesus himself was tempted horribly. How do you think Jesus felt when he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me on the cross? He knew he was not forsaken by God, but he felt forsaken. He felt as if he was in hell. There's our model. There's our example. So many people think love is a feeling or conscience is a feeling. That's very destructive. That means you have no bottom. Everything is waves. You have no anchor.
Well, of course, this all goes along very well with the start of our conversation about Socratic logic and reason. I mean, because I find so disturbingly in our world today, there are people who don't have that sort of experience and they don't approach things as if I'm in control. I can think about these things. I can reason my way through these things. I can learn more for myself. It's like I need to be told what is true. I need to be told, or they become complete skeptics in that there's no way to find out. So, I mean, to me, this is at least it connects in some way
Well,
with.
there's two opposite kinds of skeptics. There's happy skeptics and unhappy skeptics. Unhappy skeptics say, I want to know the truth and I can't find it. Darn it. Well, that's frustration, but it's not sin. But the happy skeptic says, there is no truth, so I don't have to worry about anything. I can think and do anything I please. I'm God. That's a very different kind of skepticism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you hope? Well, I'm anticipating a similar response to my question about how you hoped people would respond to your conversion story. So, at the risk of that, I'll ask this one: what do you hope readers will carry with them after finishing this book about the mystery of joy, or anything along those lines?
I don't know. Uh, I can do nothing but give you another version of the answer I gave you before. That's not how I think.
Okay.
A book is not a machine. It's unpredictable, uh, like a work of art.
Okay.
So my first reaction to your question was to try to answer it in my mind. And it took only a few seconds to realize that I can't answer that question because I don't ask that question.
Okay.
But it's a fair question, so let me try to ask it. Uh, Granted that it's unpredictable, granted that a book is not a machine but a work of art, still, what reaction on the part of readers would please me and what reaction would displease me? Well, the reaction, I like this book because it makes me feel good, or I dislike this book because it makes me feel bad, that would displease me. The reaction, gee, I never thought of that before. That's a surprise. I don't know if it's true or false, but I got to think about that some more. That would please me. But your ideology is so different than mine that you're one of the people on the other side of the fence. We couldn't possibly understand each other. Goodbye. That would displease me.
Are you finding that engaging folks in the exercise of thinking through things is becoming increasingly more difficult?
No, no, I think not. I think their curiosity and their ability to wonder and their demand for answers is just part of human nature. It's ineradicable. No, I don't think so. I think they're full of confusion, uh, and they know it. They're not arrogant enough to, most of them anyway, are not arrogant enough to think that they know everything and they're confident and they're going to conquer the world. Look at the suicide rate. Suicides don't think they're going to conquer the world. If anything, it's the opposite. It's despair rather than dogmatism that's spoiling them. So I think we need a lot of encouragement, a lot of positive, as Pope Francis is accompanying them, a lot of empathy.
Okay.
And that's as important as logic.
Yeah.
Since we are a kind of a classical, pre-K through 12 distance school here, homeschooling here, Dr. Kreeft, I was kind of wondering about your perspective of, I mean, obviously you're a Thomist, you love Socrates, you love this ancient wisdom, which seemed to me when earlier in the 20th century was being overwhelmed by other things, but it seems to me it's making a comeback in a lot of educational spheres. Is that your experience as well, that there's some saving of this wisdom going on?
Yes, I think the human race is something like a human body. When an alien enemy force enters it, the body fights it. The white blood corpuscles come and do frontline battle, and eventually it heals itself. Uh, it's true, original sin is there, and we're flawed in every aspect, but it's also true that the human mind, like the human body, was designed by God in heaven, not by man at Harvard. So I have long range optimism for the ability to recover from our diseases. I have no idea what the future is going to look like, and probably it'll get worse before it gets better. But until the very end, there's always hope. I find in my own life and in the life of cultures throughout human history a kind of roller coaster movement. After every climb, there's a loss, and after every loss, there's a climb. We probably know the more about the history of Israel than any other because it's in the Bible, and you find throughout the Old Testament that that roller coaster never stops. Good king, bad king, uh, arrogance, humility, and repentance, and then happiness, and then taking it for granted, and then back to the pride and arrogance again. Nothing in this world lasts except truth and goodness. And certainly feelings of joy and feelings of sorrow don't last. I, as a kid, was a pretty joyful kid. I had a very happy childhood. In fact, I loved jokes and I was a prankster. Uh, and I am also a pessimist. I expect the worst. That's probably because until 2004, I was a Red Sox fan, and the curse of the Bambino lasted 86 years, and we just simply could not uh, overcome it. And now that we've won 3 world championships in this millennium, we're like assimilated Jews. We've lost our deeper identity, like everybody else. But no, I'm a pessimist. Uh, And that's just feeling. And it doesn't much matter. Uh, and joy and sorrow don't necessarily exclude each other. People who are open-hearted will experience more of both. In fact, the more you love anybody or anything, the more joy you'll have and the more sorrow you'll have. Because the object of love is temporal and it's fleeting and you'll lose it by death. That's true of everything. And the more you love it, the more you'll miss it and the more sorrow you'll have. But also, the more love you have, the more joy you will have. So joy and sorrow aren't opposites. They're the two sides of a single coin.
Seems that important part, especially like today in the solemnity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, that that whether the heart is wounded, the important thing is that we learn to love and love more and more. It seems rather than, I mean, our natural propensity is to try to protect ourselves, of course, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's the amazing thing about Christianity, what it does to pain and suffering and loss. It makes them instruments of redemption. In that sense, it's the opposite of Buddhism. Buddhism is a way out of suffering. It's sort of a mystical stoicism, a way to avoid having your heart broken. And Christianity is a deliberate, come break your heart with me. Come on the cross with me because I'm there. Not because you're a masochist and you love pain, but because you want to love so much that you'll sacrifice everything, your whole life. And that's the secret of joy.
like
Yeah. What would you say to those who don't have the absolute certainty in objective and absolute truth that you do?
I would say that it's an illusion to think that I have an insight that you don't have. You have it, it's there. You know that there are certain things that are absolutely indubitable, but you're covering it up. You don't want there to be certainty because once that certainty gets into morality, your duties are not just options, they're obligations. You have to do this in order to do that. There are consequences. We want to live in a world without consequences. Fantasies have no consequences. You can make a cartoon about anything and you can make it come out any way you want. So the idea of making life into a cartoon, into an artifact, is the most dangerous thing. It seems that it's freeing. You can be anything you want. Our convincement speakers tell you this lie. They always lie to you. You can be anything you want to be. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry. I am a man. I cannot be a woman, even if I wanted to be. I know that's part of the new orthodoxy, but it's literally insane. Not only is it blasphemous, God made a mistake in making two sexes, it's insane. You can be anything. Oh, then you can be God. You can create your own values. And a lot of people think that they can. So that's something that a syllogism is not going to cure. And you can only pray to God that he brings into the life of such a person who believes that events that will shock them out of it. I don't think we have the authority to do that. We don't have the authority to kick people in the butt or slap people in the face, but God does. And that's one of the reasons we suffer. And we're all a little bit like that. We all fall a little bit into that temptation. You know, maybe I could do things the easy way. Uh, no, you can't. Well, are you sure? Well, I'm going to make you sure. Smack. Oh my gosh, how that was from God? Yep, because he loves you. He's like a parent. I remember this is going to be the only personal revelation because it's so silly that I give you. When I was baptized as a Catholic and I made a general confession, the first sin I remember being guilty of is when I was a little kid, about 5 years old or so. I wanted something very dangerous but very desirable. I forget what it was. And my mother refused to give it to me, and I hated her for it. So I prayed to God, God, please kill my mother. Well, my mother was the truth. And if you pray to God to kill the truth, hopefully he will ignore you uh, and uh, and give you the truth.
that brings us back to Romans 8:28, seemingly. Maybe that's a long reach for me to think that the ways that we come to learn these lessons, if we cooperate with them. I don't know, do we have to cooperate with them in order for them to work for our good?
Ultimately, yes, at least in the area of morality.
Okay.
God will not interfere with our free will, but he will interfere with our ideas. He will give us light from outside. Receiving truth is an act of reception or passivity. Passivity doesn't mean being asleep. It means being a woman instead of a man. The origin of male chauvinism is, in the act of sexual intercourse, men are apparently active. Women are just as active. A catcher is just as active as a pitcher in baseball. So receptivity is not an imperfection. Jesus had it. He received from his father his instructions, his mission, and he received ideas from his father, and yet he's equal to his father. And we're like that. We need the reception of truth, and we need the free decision to practice it and to practice the virtues. God made us both active and passive because he's got both in himself.
Okay. Well, I found that recurring theme of Romans 8:28 and your return several times to praying, thy will be done in relation to God, God's will be done. Those two things I found they resonated deeply with me, and I am deeply grateful for them.
Well, that's because God's will is perfect. There's nothing that can judge or improve or alter God's will. That's the power, part of the power of St. Maria Faustina Kowalska's diary, which is origin of the Divine Mercy thing. The will of God is an absolutely absolute. And it can't be anything less than that. It's the ultimate prayer. Everything's in there. Why do you search the truth? Because it's the will of God. Why do you love your neighbor? Because it's the will of God. Why do you want to go to heaven instead of creating one on your own? Because it's the will of God. Why are you doing this little daily duty? Why are you paying your bills? Because it's the will of God. And when that demand, that desire, that deepest demand of your own heart, namely to do God's will, when that becomes the motive for everything you do, when that flows into the rest of your life, even things like sweeping the floor, little things, that's the way to sainthood. Just as Saint Teresa, the Little Flower of Lisieux, was a master of little things, and Mother Teresa often also spoke of little things. So Saint Faustina has the same little way. It's the way that erases the difference between the great and the small. In God's eyes, everything is great. Not that everything has the same ontological value or moral value. A pen has less value than a book because a pen is a means and a book is the end. But the thing that you do now, the little thing, if you do it for the motive of the love of God and obeying the will of God, that becomes more meritorious and more powerful than doing big things for a smaller motive. It's easy, let me do it. Oh, this is hard. Yeah, but it's just a little thing. But the effort you have to make to overcome that temptation, the effort that you have to make when God takes your cane or your walking stick away from you, your emotions, and they don't propel you anymore. You have to swim for yourself. You can't just follow the wave. That's not much fun, but you become strong that way. And that's what we're all going to have in purgatory. The vast majority of us, I think, will get to heaven through purgatory, and purgatory is some hard lessons. It's all the saints agree that purgatory is very painful because we're thwarting our own will. Our own will has to be crushed, and it's imperfectly crushed in this life. And yet it's God who crushes it, and you see him and know him As soon as you die, you get the particular judgment and you see God face to face, and he infallibly guarantees that you're going to go to heaven and see him forever. And that gives you the greatest joy, far greater than anything else on earth. And then you go to purgatory, and in order to attain that joy, you experience a pain greater than anything on earth. But it's a pain you want. It's like being full of scabs and bugs and mud and dirt and going to the mansion that is heaven, and God meets you at the door and he says, welcome, you're my child, but you stink. Don't you want to take a hot shower before you come into the dining room? And you say, oh, yes, please. Well, it's going to hurt, you know. So what? I need that shower. You want it.
Mm.
We're getting close to the end of our time here, but I know I'm going to say my wife is always talking about the angels and how her guardian angel specifically is her best friend and how she greets him every morning and they talk throughout the day. You mentioned in your book something about angels as a best friend, so I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Yes, very importantly, yes. Uh, my wife and I both have devotion to the angels, the guardian angels. Uh, and God uses them invisibly. They're very humble. They don't usually appear. But I'm convinced that when we go to heaven and meet our guardian angel, we're going to see our life very differently. Oh, that was you. Thank you. How come you didn't? Oh, well, now I see it. Uh, they're the master of your life. They're going to sing out your life. They're going to make it into a song. And you're going to see how powerful they were and how effective they were. Like God, they don't interfere with your free will, which is why the more you love them as God's instruments, the more you empower them to be his instruments and guide you in the right direction. Yeah, I'm very big on the angels because God is. He didn't have to create them. They're not necessary. He didn't have to create two sexes. He didn't have to create pussycats, but he did. And we're happy he did.
So certainly speaking with your angel then, or asking for your angel's help throughout the day is a way to strengthen that. Is there any other advice you'd have as far as how we can strengthen our relationship with the angels?
Well, it works two ways. Angels help you to strengthen your relationship to God, and God helps you to strengthen your relationship with the angels. We often forget that second way. We pray to angels as we pray to saints as intermediaries, but God established those intermediaries in order to raise them up and glorify them and make them positive instruments. And that's the same reason he gave us free will, and that's the same reason he gave us work. He could have fed us by mouth in the Garden of Eden, but he gave us work to do. And he could miraculously give us the grace to never sin again and never be tempted again instantly with a flick of his finger. But he doesn't. He gives us spiritual work to do, which is largely prayer. So prayer and work and angels all fit the same category. This CEO, this manager is not a, he exalts his employees and his subordinates. And then we become subordinates for other people. We offer to God our virtues and our sufferings for the welfare, for ultimately the salvation of other people. That's an amazing, amazing responsibility. We can actually make a difference, an eternal difference in other people's lives. We don't know how much or how it blends with what Christ does, but it's part of it. We're on the cross with Christ, and we offer our prayers, works, joys, and sufferings with his. And that empowers them to a way that I think will be flabbergasted in heaven to see the difference.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Kreeft. You're welcome anytime you want to come and talk to our families and our audience, but it's been great.
I think you're doing a terribly important work. You know that, but the difference your work is going to make many decades from now in this world is unpredictable. So God bless your work. Hurrah for Kolbe Academy.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us, Dr. Kreeft, and all that you have given us in the form of many gifts of lasting value. We'll have links in our show notes to the two new books of yours that we have been discussing today, and some other relevant links, including a link to an episode with Mark Brumley. You mentioned him earlier, and a couple other relevant KolbeCast episodes. Is there any one place you like to send people to find out more about you?
Well, again, that's the wrong question. I'm going to say Ignatius Press or any full-service bookstore or Amazon will have all my books, and almost all of them are in print. But my books aren't basically about me.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of the autobiography, they're about something else. I'm trying to introduce you somehow to Jesus. And if you ask me the question, which book of the 100 plus that you've written would you want everybody in the world to read if they could pick up just one? I think it would be the one about Jesus, called Jesus Shock. Because if he's the center of your life, he's the center of everything, and he will transform everything.
All right, Dr. Kreeft, thank you so much for this. Please come back and visit with us. We appreciate it so much.
Okay, goodbye. God bless you and your work.
Subscribe to the KolbeCast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam.